It's a warm welcome to this webinar on virtual one-to-one coaching. So a really warm welcome from Liz and myself. As Liz said earlier, it's great to see some familiar names in the group this morning. So, I mean, obviously in the current situation, this session feels really, really important, but, you know, in the future, whatever happens, I really hope that this session continues to serve you. Actually, one of the reasons why our coach training programs involve some virtual elements has always to try and normalize working virtually as a coach. And it's just over the years, Liz and I have met a lot of coaches, also in supervision, where coaches will often be talking about how different virtual coaching is from face to face, and so this morning we really want to share with you some ideas, some experiences. You may refer to this as best practice, but this is really just coming from our own experience of working online and what's really supported and served us. So we really hope this is useful. The session will be recorded, so you will be able to listen to it after this session. As I said earlier, you're on listen only mode. So we would still like to make this as interactive as we can. So please feel free to add the chat panel and just add comments and reflections into the chat panel as we go through the session. As always, I'd encourage you to close down any applications that are open, so web browsers, email, and that's really not just to manage your presence, but also sometimes it will affect the transmission speed. So just really encourage you to close everything down. Have a pen and paper handy just to capture reflections as we go. And the session we will be around about 45 minutes, depending on the questions that arise as we go through the session as well. Okay, so I mean, Liz and I, we've both been practicing as coaches for a long time, and I suppose one of the experiences that we've both had is really to take time and really be conscious around how we're setting up an online coaching program. So again, part of this session will be helping you think about your practice currently. You might be new to working online as a coach, or you might be very experienced. So we're really not here to teach you to suck eggs. It's really just trying to support you as much as we can. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass over to Liz just to start the session.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Damion. And as you said, so our programs have always had an element of online working, precisely as you said, to encourage people to become more familiar with and comfortable working this way. I don't think any of us could see that it would be tested in quite the way that it's being tested right now. So as Damion said, this may be something that's very new to you. It may be something that's already part of your practice, and you're finding that you're having to put more online, as all of us are. So as Damion said, it's really the purpose of the session is to support your thinking around how to hold a really effective online session with your clients. So actually, just to get started, I think one of the key things just to think about actually is sort of what questions are you holding about this? So actually, as you think about online coaching, what are you sort of toying with in your own mind in terms of what might be the same, what might be different? So perhaps, and what questions you're holding. So perhaps if you just want to put into the chat panel some of the questions that you've got, and then Damion and I will do our very best during the course of the webinar to answer some of those. So just take a minute or so just to capture them and put them in the chat panel for us. Okay, lovely. So thank you, Maddie. So how do we encourage companies that it's an effective way to coach people? Hina, thank you, how to be really present. Some avoidance, so thank you, Darren. Yeah, lovely. So again, maintaining the intimacy. So something about different, picking up on body language. So they're coming in thick and fast. Great. And a piece around energy as well. So there are some themes in there actually, which is really useful. So some themes around sort of presence and how do I work online, and something around actually how is the coachee responding to it, which is also something that we'll bring in, and that sense of actually just how do I really sort of be fully present and work in this way, recognizing that it's both the same in some ways and different in other ways. So some of the comments are around about how do I pick up on the body language, how do I really experience or notice what's happening for my coachee. So we'll do our best as we go through this to answer, and we're hoping we've set it up so that a lot of those questions will be answered, and we'll have a pause as well at various points so that you can also just reflect on what you're taking from the session. So just a key question actually to start with. So I'm going to get Damion just to, thank you, Damion. So I think a key question to start with is this question about what's the same and what's different. So I sort of remember when I started to do more work online, the one thing that I really sort of had to work with initially was my own mindset about working online, and what I believed about it, what I believed was different about it or the same. So what we're going to encourage you to do is to grab a piece of paper and a pen, and we're going to give you a couple of minutes actually, just for you to capture a bit of reflection for yourself. So really want you to just spend a couple of minutes thinking about this question. So as you reflect on working online with your coachees, what do you believe is the same about working with them in this way? And what do you believe is different about it? So we're just going to give you a couple of minutes, and then we'll get you to share some of this. So of course, part of this is it's really sort of helping you connect with your mindset around working in this way. Okay, so just another minute for you to capture some thoughts for yourself. Okay, so if you take a look at what you've written about what's the same and what's different in terms of what you believe about it, just underline some of those beliefs that are supportive for you in doing this work. So what are the ones that are going to be helpful as you make the transition, I'm imagining, to working more in this way? And what are the ones that are serving you less well? And then perhaps feel free to just start sharing a few of those again in the chat panel for us, so we can just see some of your reflections. So we'll just wait for a few of those to start popping in. So Martin, thank you about how to work with those embodied elements of coaching and the somatic. So thank you, Dave. T-Grow is the same. So we still have that structure for us. The power of the pause, the importance of focusing on the coachee, so that listening is the same. So great. So always be contracting. Thank you. So there are lots of things, as you're rightly saying, there are lots of things that are the same. And again, we'll reflect on those. And some of the challenges might be around, so that sort of physical presence is lost. So how do I, as Martin said, how do I work in an embodied way, and how do I perhaps pick up on what's happening for my coachee and not seeing the whole person and body language? And also, so Maddie, thank you. It can also be easier for us, for both coachee and coach, to be distracted and also to cope with those interruptions. So that's great. So actually you've given us a sort of nice lead into some of what we're going to be talking about. So I think really important to acknowledge this for yourself and recognize that some of these are supportive and some are interferences, and that will also be true for your coachees. So part of our work with our coachees in helping them also work in this way is to help them connect with what's going on for them as they come into online coaching as well. So Damion, over to you. We're going to sort of share some of our best practice tips around how to work virtually.
Yeah, so we're going to sort of build as we go through this session. I mean, I want to start with just this aspect of logistics. You know, there's so many different platforms that are available to us. I started off many years ago, of course, using Skype, and you know, just find that so unreliable. I mean, these days I do use Zoom because I find it more cost effective, and it's something that Liz and I use in a lot of our group work as well. So we really know the platform. But there is something about the coach really needs to do their homework and think about what's the platform that, you know, is going to be most accessible, but also most reliable. I'd say, you know, speak to other coaches, speak to other people that work online to get a sense of what's best. You know, there's so many different options. You can FaceTime, there's so many different apps in terms of video calling, but is that really as effective for us when we're trying to, you know, support somebody else, you know, to have an effective coaching dialogue? I think we need to really think about what's going to be most effective for us and the coachee. You know, we need to think about things such as testing our broadbands. You know, making sure that, you know, our broadband capacity will support this. So, for example, on Zoom, you can do various tests around that. You know, around volume, around your mics. You know, making sure you've got the right equipment, a headset, or just some headphones and microphone are really useful. You know, Zoom, for instance, they offer some online training sessions. You know, just watch them, get to know the platform, because then you can understand the functionality. For example, on Zoom, you can share a model on the screen, and the coachee and you can both draw on it. You know, so it can be an interactive conversation. We can use whiteboard facility, you know, so the coachee can draw or write and reflect as you're having the session. But there's sort of a sense of really doing your homework. I can't stress that enough, you know, to really understand this. You know, when you're actually on the session, encouraging the coachee to go on speaker view just means that the other person is big on the screen and that your picture is minimized, or the coachee's picture is minimized. Again, rather than having both of you on the screen, just really supports, you can really pay attention to what you're seeing. I appreciate, you know, we're not necessarily staring down the camera in the same way, but at the same time, we can really get a sense of where the coachee is when we can sort of see them fully. You know, a little tip I often played with was just putting a post-it note over my picture. So I remember when I first started working online, it became a bit of a distraction for me, seeing myself as I was working with the coachee. So there's a sense of really thinking about what's going to support us to be at our best. I mean, I've got a standing desk, and sometimes I will stand to make sure if my energy is feeling low, you know. Something I've invested in recently, just because I noticed I was sitting down a lot because of the current situation. You know, always encouraging you as the coach, but also you need to do some work with the clients who help them feel comfortable on the platform that you're going to be using. So getting them to close down all the other applications that they may have open, email, other sort of messages popping up on the screen, just so they're not distracted during the session. And the same for you. This piece around, sometimes it will affect the transmission speed. You know, preparing your space. You know, you need to be comfortable that you're happy with what the coachee is seeing around you. Yeah, I mean, we've all had instances where perhaps the coachee hasn't really thought about that. So again, we might need to help them think before the session around where they're going to be. Is it a private space? Is it confidential? These are all things to really have the conversation around. Zoom, for instance, have a lot of question and answers sort of information on their website, which is something I often send my coachee to read before the session. The first session, just encouraging them to arrive a bit early, just so we can make sure that the microphone's working for them, and the sound, etc. Preparing your space, you might also just want to declutter, so you feel really present for the coachee as well. So making sure you've got time to do that. We're talking about preparing your equipment for the call. Well, this is a bit again where we need to think about what we might do with the coachee. So it may be that perhaps we're doing the first session with them, so we might use a tool such as a Wheel of Work or Career and Lifeline exercise. Well, if that's going to be the case and we think that we're going to be doing that, well, we could either, if we've got the functionality, show that on the screen and they can annotate it as we're working through the session, or we can email it through to them. But we need to make sure that we've got PDFs available that we can email. Have we got the right email address for the coachee? Now we need to make sure, for instance, that we've got telephone numbers for the coachee, not just mobile landline. What happens if the Wi-Fi drops? These are all consideration for us, as well as thinking about our energy patterns. So I think at some level, it can be, because we're sometimes used to being online for meetings, and so for some organizations, they pack in that in the agenda. So the coachee might think about, well, it's just fine, I can book this coaching session in towards the end of the day. Well, maybe they've been online all day, so again, being conscious around your energy patterns. Just because we're working online and we're not traveling, I would still encourage you to think about a maximum number of sessions that you want to do during the day. For me, I wouldn't be doing more than 3 1-hour sessions during the day. So again, it's think about what's right for you. So there's something about really preparing, thinking about the logistics. A client of Liz and I now has a screen that she's had behind her, just so she can make sure that people can't see what's behind her. I just make sure that everything's tidy. I mean, these are just in case I'm working with a coachee around their prioritization, perhaps. But these are all just things to consider. So that's really thinking about the space, the software, the logistics. The next thing really is thinking about how you prepare yourself in the coachee a bit more.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Damion. I'm also reminded of another colleague of ours who makes sure her coachees never see the floor of her office, because that's where her filing system is. So there is something about, just as Damion said, sort of preparing ourselves and also preparing our coachees. So actually, Damion has touched on some of these, and they came up in some of your questions. So it is important to build in time to develop our own capacity to be present. So I'm sure you all have your own way when you're working face to face with someone of getting really present for that session. So, however you do that, whether you use the journey itself to help you get present, whatever it is, you will already, as experienced coaches, have a way of really doing that. And the only difference online is you just need to pay attention to what you need to be present online. So what feels the same for you in terms of time that you need, and what might feel a little bit different. So I think one of you observed, sometimes we can feel perhaps more distracted. So again, it's thinking about what I might need to do to clear away those distractions so that I can be really present. And I think especially because of what's happening around us all right now, it's giving ourselves permission to do what we need. And also there's something about being kind to ourselves, and we'll come on to the disruption piece. There's also something about part of your role here sometimes, so I think it was Darren who sort of talked about some resistance from your coachee, is about helping your coachee get present and comfortable working online, and this point about your role as an educator. So you may be helping your coachee get familiar with working in this way. And I think it's okay to sometimes see yourself a little bit in that role of, as Damion said, really helping someone understand what's going to support them working this way. from the very practical, as Damion mentioned, helping someone sort of shut things down on their computer and become really comfortable with the platform, and also in that sort of first, before you've even met with each other, perhaps sending an email or helping them think in advance about what some of the things might be that will help them get present online. So please do feel, and if I'm working first time with someone online, I will email them beforehand and just sort of invite them to think about some of these things, about what's going to support them to be present, what might be distracting for them and how they can manage that, where they're going to be working. So I think one of you asked a question about how can someone guarantee it's a confidential space. So again, it's important just to ask coaches this. And I think it's especially important now because of course some people have their families at home and are trying to juggle that. So really sort of working with your coachee to help them identify what the distractions are going to be and how they can manage it. Damion's already mentioned models. So in as much as we can ever know what models we might use, because obviously for a lot of us it's very emergent, I think being at least knowing that you have them available to you should you need them, whether in a PDF form that you can then quickly email to your coachee to print off, or whether it's so you share it on your screen. I think that can help remove any distractions we might have as the coach. It's always good to get your, get your coachee to come with pens, papers, so that they are also prepared in advance. And then the disruptions piece. So I know in the next slide, when Damion talks about contracting, we're going to talk a little bit about disruptions. But I think one of the key things that we do as the coach in preparing both ourselves and our coachees is actually to start contracting around some of the disruptions because it helps normalize it. So we're going to contract around losing connection. So Damion mentioned making sure you have your coachee's phone number so that if you do both lose connection and you can't easily reconnect, that you know that you can phone each other. And actually it's really useful to be specific and say, I will call you as the coach. So you don't then have this, exchanging several voice messages. Also useful as much as possible to talk to people who might be around you in the household and create the conditions for it being as quiet as it can be. And also to talk to your coachee about interruptions. So, just to, we have a phrase of just embracing whatever energy is around you. So children, cats, dogs, disruptions of people coming to the door. If you have a conversation about it, it will remove it as an interference for you, and it will also remove it as an interference for your coachee. And then the last piece around self-care, actually, our encouragement is not only to give yourself time before the session, it's also to give yourself time after and to encourage the same in your coachees. So I think I'm very aware that some of the people that we're talking to are spending their whole day on Zoom currently or another platform like Microsoft Teams. So our encouragement is really to try and give people that sort of steer to give themselves a bit of space afterwards, to really so they can spend some time reflecting and get what they need from the coaching session and give themselves that little break before they then engage with something else. So all things just to be thinking about before and as we come into that sort of session with our coachees. Damion.
That really leads us into this whole piece around contracting. So, if you're starting off with a new client online, obviously, building some of the areas that we've spoken about already into the contracting element for the program is something that you'll need to do. If you've been working with someone face-to-face and for the next number of sessions while we're in lockdown, you're going to be working online, again, I just encourage you to build some time in at the start of the next session just to talk about how this is going to be slightly different for both of us, and what do we need to do to really make this work for both of us. So, you know, the ABC always be contracting. But there are some key things when we think about working with a coachee to contract. And, you know, we've mentioned some of these already about disruptions, etc. But that sort of sense of, you know, really just naming the fact that we're working online. So, you know, a sentence that I will often say when I'm working online to a client is, you know, so as we're working online, if either of us, you know, lose connection, you know, please don't panic. You know, we'll just come back online as quickly as we can. So, you know, naming that at the start of the session, you know, naming, as Liz said, the fact that if I lose you and I can't get back online, I will call you. So as the coach, I will be calling you. So making sure that you've got the appropriate sort of phone numbers. So there's obviously some key things to talk about in terms of us being online, but I think one of the challenges for coaches is the fact that this really isn't, or it doesn't have to be different in terms of the way that I work with you. So, you know, working in more experiential ways. So for instance, you know, if you've learned wisdom with hindsight with us so far, you know, visualization exercise, you know, there's no reason why I can't do that with the coaching client. I will need to contract for that again. So for instance, if we were about to move into that session, again, I'll just be reminding you that we're working online, because I'll probably be inviting you to close your eyes. So, you know, during this next exercise, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes as we use this visualization exercise. You know, just remembering that we are working online. So if my voice disappears at any point, you know, please just stay with the exercise, and I will pick it up as soon as I rejoin. You know, hopefully that won't happen, but just to say that that's a potential. You know, so again, we're just naming these things as a reminder. It just means that the coachee feels well held. You know, I could be inviting them to go and stand in a place in the room that represents a future state when they've achieved something. You know, again, it could be, oh, I need to see the coachee. But, you know, this is where often we need to trust the coachee in their process. You know, if the coachee can move their camera, great, but I really wouldn't put too much pressure on the coachee. So I might be saying to Liz, like, Liz, now I really want you to go and stand in a place in the room that represents how the other person is seeing this situation. And I really want you to walk over there, and I'm going to invite you to connect to their perspective. So I'm going to talk you through that. Now, when you stand up, I'm not going to be able to see you. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to let me know when you're at the place that represents this. And then I might need to say some other things around that. You know, so, you know, rather than me interrupting you, I'm going to invite you to let me know that when you're ready for the next question, because I can't see you. So I'm not going to be able to read that. You know, so again, we're just spot contracting, and we're just naming all these things that might happen in the session. We could also, you know, talk a bit more around that process of coaching. So again, if the coachee is moving away from the camera so I can't see them, it may be, you know, I'm asking more sort of succinct questions. So just tell me what you're noticing right now. You know, I might be naming the fact I can't see your process. So I can't see the development process at the moment in terms of how this exercise is working. So just tell me what's happening for you right now. Again, we're putting more trust in the coachee so we can see their process. You know, I think the key thing is always encouraging the coachee to have their camera on. I mean, I set my Zoom so as soon as the coachee joins, the camera is turned on. But again, some people are not always comfortable with that, so they turn their cameras off. So again, it's helping the coachee understand the reasons for this. Now, if, for instance, that the broadband speed is impacted in the session, you know, sometimes asking the coachee to turn their camera off supports that. But of course, we will turn our camera off as well, so we're both in the same place. So sometimes that will support us in terms of really being able to continue with the session and be able to really hear. But again, of course, we're now losing being able to see the coachee. So we're really going to have to tune into what we're hearing on the session. So again, we might spot contract around that. So I'm just here, I just heard a big pause. So I'm wondering what was happening for you in that moment of the session. Or I noticed a long sigh there. So again, we're going to tune more into the energy and other patterns in terms of what we're hearing. So they're just some things to really think about. I think the key thing is in the contracting for an online program, or if we're halfway through and recontracting, it's really sitting with the coachee and talking about some what ifs. You know, I was working with a client the other day who had a poorly daughter at home, and she was really concerned around you know, whether her daughter would need her. And of course, you know, we contracted around whether it was the right time or not for the session. In the end, she wanted to continue, and there was a point even when her daughter came in and sat in the, you know, on the side of the room. But that's what she needed at that time, I suppose. You know, there's that piece of, as Liz said, sometimes including these distractions. You know, I've often had a coachee sitting there with a cat or a dog on their lap, stroking it as we're having a coaching session. So there's something around, you know, making the coachee comfortable in the contracting that we're doing. You know, conversations around, so what's your experience like of working online? You know, what really supports you to be present? A great question to ask somebody when we're contracting to be working online. I had someone the other week who zoomed out. And he dropped me an email before the session saying, look, I've spent all day on Zoom. Is it okay if we talk on the phone for the coaching session? And I said, yeah, why don't we both go and sit in our garden so we're getting some fresh air? You know, so again, just checking in on what the coachee needs to really support them, I think is really important. So that leads us into this whole piece of the relationship, which I'm going to pass over to Liz just to talk a bit more about.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Damion. Actually, I was just thinking as you were talking, so one of the things I sometimes invite my coaches to do, if they're really deep in the process and I might not be able to see, them if we're telephone coaching, or they may be sort of out of my eyesight, is I'll actually invite them, you know, and tell me when you're ready for the next question. So as Damion said, you can really sort of encourage the coachee just to be much more noticing their own process and feel that you can have a conversation about how you're going to work with them around that. And this slide is really to help re-engage us with what is fundamentally the same. And of course, the piece that is fundamentally the same is the how I sort of create that relationship and reconnect with my coachee. And there's something about absolutely sort of remembering everything about your strengths as a coach and your ability to build this relationship and to be yourself. So a lot of what we've talked about is around creating the conditions for this to happen and acknowledging some of the things that might be around us that are either going to support us or distract us. And once we've paid attention to that, and once we've managed it, and once we've had those conversations, there is really something absolutely about trusting yourself. So trust yourself in this process and trust the process. So there have been many, many times for me working online where, having set it all up and done the contracting, it actually doesn't feel any different at all. And it really does feel that there is that close connection with someone. And Martin earlier asked a question about embodied coaching. And I've certainly had experiences online in the same way as when I'm face to face with someone, where I get a sort of a palpable response in my own body, my own sort of sense of what's happening, that I can still share with my coachee. So it's important to remember that we are fundamentally wired to connect and to tune into people. And so if we create the conditions to do that, which are really about removing interferences so we can be fully present, then that is as possible online as it is when we're working face to face. And it's really important that we trust that that's possible. Because as we've said all along, it's often our own interferences that get in the way more than anything else. So really sort of supporting that for yourself and believing that for yourself is really an important part of this. And as Damion said, sort of trusting your coachee, so as always, work with your coachee and meet them where they are with all of this. I think especially in the current climate. So really sort of be authentic, be yourself, trust yourself in the process, and trust that this works. Damion.
Yeah, and I just wanted to sort of pick up on this piece around the process and just some observations and experiences that we've had. So again, thinking about the beginning of the session, I often find that coachees are more relaxed because they're in their own surroundings. I was working with a senior partner in a professional services firm who used to wear a three-piece suit when I used to see him in his office. And the other week he was there in his hoodie in his spare room. And there was a sense of his corporate mask had fallen away, actually. And so, in terms of this rapport and this sense of connection, I often find, and it's something that Liz and I were talking about in terms of the coachee being in that more relaxed state when we're working online with them. However, because of experiences of business meetings, people can often get straight into the task quite quickly. Now, often people will talk about it feeling more focused on an online session. And you may find the coachees already jumping into the task. And just really to remind us, this is really about our authority to be able to pause them, and honor the relationship. So much has happened since we've last seen the coachee, and that initial stage of really coming together as two human beings and connecting, and then setting the session up to succeed. So bringing them back to the contract and really talking about all those points I spoke about earlier. I think sometimes there's an impulse to get into the topic really quickly because of what they're used to in working online. So I think that's the first thing about the beginnings, just making sure we're holding this container and the relationship at the forefront. Something around the energy. So, we will often reduce the length of time of our coaching sessions when we're working online. So if Liz and I tend to work a couple of hours with somebody face to face, we're usually looking potentially an hour and a half or even an hour working online, depending on the coachee and the situation. If we are doing longer sessions, I think we need to be mindful of the coachee's energy and our energy. So there'll be an encouragement to, take a break when we need to, just a comfort break, 5 minutes, encourage the coachee to go and get some air. Something that we will do is to go and get some air and to walk around, and then come back together. So I think we just need to be very mindful of that. Brain science shows, after about an hour of focusing, the energy is gone. So really, really being mindful of the energy. Again, I think with this bit as well, just knowing when's the right time for you to do your best work online. Some of that might be to do with distractions as well. If the coachee's homeschooling at the moment, perhaps they're going to be more available in the afternoon. I just think these are all conversations that we need to have again. Just because we agreed it up front for the face-to-face, well, we need to go back to reconfirming these pieces. And the other piece is just around the ending, a bit like the beginning. Sometimes we've done such great work with the coachee, but we're not spending enough time at the end to really cement the learning that the coachee is taking away from the conversation. Cement the next steps in terms of, what's going to happen between the sessions, the support they need when we're going to get back together. I think it's really important just to make sure that, the other bookend is there in terms of the relationship, and the session feels really well held for the coachee. So it's just, again, just from observations and experiences, just making sure we own the process. We need to manage the time. So with 10 minutes to go in an hour session, We need to be pulling it into what's going to be happening after the session. So they're just, I suppose, our key areas. Liz and I did write a blog on this as well, which you'll be able to find on our website. I'm conscious of time, Liz, so I'm just going to invite you to perhaps start to pull things together.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Damion. So just to give you a couple of minutes to reflect. So as Damion said, we've got sort of 5 more minutes, but really useful, just take a couple of minutes for yourself now. So what are some of the key insights for you around this? What has it perhaps made you reflect on in terms of what you might want to add into your practice in the way that you work with your coachees in this way? And I'm hoping also what's it really reconnected you with about what you can trust about this process. So what some of your sort of strengths are that you know you're bringing into it. So just a little bit of reflection on insights. And then, of course, that bookend Damion talked about. So what are you going to do with it? So what difference does knowing that or having that insight make? And I'm sure for all of us, there are going to be lots of opportunities for us to be practicing this over the coming weeks. So, so what's going to support you actually using some of these insights to really develop your practice? Because this is it may feel like a challenge in lots of ways, and it's also a great learning opportunity for all of us, if we can engage with it in that way. And also, of course, we're supporting our coachees to do that. So perhaps just as you capture those, if you want to put some of them are already popping into the chat panel, so thank you. Yep, so it's great. So something about more time on contracting, just ask or offer, thank you, Louise, and trusting yourself, Amanda. And actually really something about enjoying it, you know, feeling positive about it. And of course, you know, when I can trust it, when I can feel like that about it, of course, that's what I'm going to be encouraging my coachee to do as well. So great. So they're coming in thick and fast now. So great. So delighted if it's helped sort of make just people feel this is more, sort of normalize it, make them feel more positive about it. So that's great. That was really our intention. To really sort of trust it. Lovely. And Egla, thank you, your comment about taking a break. So yeah, really all these things important. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes to go. So I'm just going to hand back over to Damion just to finish everything off. For my part, it's been a real pleasure to have you all on the call. And I know we can't see you, but it's been lovely to know that you've been joining us. So I wish you sort of all the best in the coming weeks. And for those of you that we're going to see on our programs, I'm going to look forward to hearing what your learning has been around this. So Damion, over to you.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone, our CPD event is still happening, deepening your practice on the 10th of July. So if worst comes to the worst, we'll be moving online and we're really comfortable to do that. But just again, just to remind you, there's some really interesting topics, really interesting faculty members that are running the sessions. So I hope this is something, again, that you might be interested with. But also, and the information is on our website, but also just to say that next week we have our next webinar. So on the 14th of April at 12 o'clock UK time, Monica Ross and myself are going to be in a dialogue and discussion around embodied coaching. And with that, of course, we're going to be talking about how we can adapt our practice for online working as well. So as Liz said, real joy to have everybody with us this morning, and that sense of the community that you know you're part of. So really go well, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you online next week. The information about the webinar is on the website as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.